home. The area surrounding Whataburger Field now looks like a military base. Michael Gibson is in the newsroom now with more on what's going on out there. Michael.
Well, Rudy, we simply passed over the harbor bridge and looked down, and much to our surprise, there were helicopters and all kinds of military equipment where most people either park for a baseball game or simply drive by as they head down Port Avenue. Here's what we're talking about. We found U.S. Army Apache helicopters parked and ready for shipment, as well as a number of Blackhawk choppers. We're told that these aircraft, along with other military equipment, just arrived at the port from overseas action. The amount of that equipment that's sitting in the area is described as a heavy brigade.
This is a 3-vessel, 3-week offload. Over 2,500 pieces of military equipment.
Now, the Port of Corpus Christi expects to see even more military equipment brought into the port from now on. That business has been slowly growing since Hurricane Harvey. That's when the military decided to send more equipment through the port after seeing all the flooding that took place at the port of Beaumont after the hurricane hit back then. Now, we're told by port officials that this military transport operation should be completed sometime in the coming weeks. Rudy?
All right, thanks, Mike, for that report.